Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host of these TechTonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts that have had a pleasure of hosting for the last, well, 4.5 years now, with the intent to bring to you Canadian technology curious audiences conversations with technology leaders and executives who are truly making impact and shaping the future of Canada. And then, as you know, that program's now expanded to include other interesting topics, relevant, timely discussions on tech matters that are important, relevant, and actionable. Today, I have a very special privilege to welcome a true luminary and a legend of Canadian tech leadership community. I am thrilled to welcome Paul Bellack. Paul, thank you very much for your time.
Well, good morning or good day to all. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for the kind words, Dalibor.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you join me and join us on this program. For the audience, this is actually running live. Today is March 19th, 2025. So in case you have any questions and comments that you might want to ask Paul as we go into this conversation, please use the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. And also as a reminder, the session is being recorded and I will soon post it on TechTonic Conversations YouTube channel so you can see it again or share it with your colleagues or friends if you would like. So Paul, I know of you, of course, I heard of you and what you have been doing. We were actually introduced through a common friend a number of months ago. Um, and although I know your career, it would be a disservice for me to introduce you. In other words, what we should be doing is actually we should be asking you to tell us your story in your own words. So maybe that's where we start, Paul. If you can share with me and our audiences your life and career story, how you navigated it to where you're at now.
Well, I'm now semi-retired after a
Yeah.
45-year career, my fifth decade in the business, I suppose. I've been
Wow.
a I've been a CIO in six different companies. My last and certainly most prolific gig was a 9-year run as global CIO of Magna International.
Yeah.
But I've been CIO of a couple of other Canadian names, HBC 20 years ago, Sobeys, a couple of other smaller Canadian retailers. And along the way, I've also been a IT strategy transformation partner level guy at EY, at IBM, and what is now part of PwC.
Wow.
So I consider myself very fortunate to have such a long and varied career and had a lot of fun along the way too.
So when you reflect on this case, this is your fifth decade. Oh my God. When you reflect on your career, and of course the progressions and changes, um, were there any particular sort of pivotal moments or instrumental people or or key lessons learned that you may want to share? Maybe we can start with any sort of pivotal moments that may have occurred along the way that kind of shaped your
Well,
thinking.
reflecting on my journey, I suppose there were two, pardon me, pivotal moments where maybe serendipity played a major role in my career. The first is my entry into the IT domain in the first place.
Yeah.
I came out of university as an industrial engineer, actually, and my first job was in that field. I quickly finished my MBA and moved into a finance role, actually for 7 years.
Oh,
So for the first portion of my career, really didn't have anything to do with IT. At the time, I think year eight, a situation emerged. One of my peers was running IT for the company I was at. He was a brilliant technology, but frankly, not a very good executive. His IT org was struggling. He really didn't know how to turn it around. I had a lot of ideas on how to move IT forward. So together, in fact, he and I went to our mutual boss and pitched an idea where I would run IT and he would be my sort of CTO. Back then, we didn't call them CTOs, but he would be my sort of lead
The
technologist and I would be
technologist.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
business facing planner and spokesman and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So the boss at the time took a little bit of a chance on me because I had no experience in running an IT organization, but it worked out great. So that I guess was a case of being at the right place at the right time. That was 37 years ago, and in fact, that boss continues to be one of my mentors to this day. So
Wow.
that's kind of an interesting story.
Wow.
And I guess the second pivotal moment is at the other end of my career. Uh, regards my decision to join Magna as global CIO. So in fact, I was in my late 50s and very happily established at EY as an executive director, doing some pretty interesting work at a great firm. I was quite happy there. At the time, EY was Magna's auditor.
Yeah.
They got a call from the Magna CFO who was looking for some consulting help with IT strategy. So one thing led to another. EY asked me to go up to see him. We kind of clicked. 6 months later, I accepted the job to be global CIO. So again, it was a little bit of a fluke. The irony was that I really kind of hesitated to take that job. It was clearly going to be a very big challenge involving a lot of time and energy. Frankly, I was on the fence, but my late wife basically told me I was nuts not to pursue that fantastic opportunity and pushed me over the fence, and the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Had a
So, so,
great run there.
so Paul, when you reflect back on this 45 years, um, obviously exceptionally successful journey that continues now. What do you think? What's the secret sauce? Like, what was the secret sauce? What were the key sort of lessons or perhaps attributes that you have that you feel were instrumental in helping you achieve this level of career success?
Well, I've always been wired for change, for transformation, right? So back then we didn't use the big T word transformation, but I've always been interested in and motivated in driving change and kind of seeing a vision and moving towards it. And I've always had circumstances where, for whatever reason, the company or the situation has been in a circumstance where change was necessary. Uh, I wouldn't describe myself as a technical genius. I know enough to be dangerous in IT,
Yeah.
but it's the kind of the combination of business savviness and knowledge of IT and the wiring around transformation that kind of was probably the secret sauce.
Business owners, well, I noticed that you described how you actually entered into IT, and I heard you are an engineer
I'm
who
an
went and
engineer,
finished an MBA degree.
right? And that
So
that I think was critical, right? So
I was, yeah,
engineering is a great discipline to learn. I was an industrial engineer, which gave me exposure to people, process, and technology. And then in the MBA degree, I specialized in both finance and what we then called management information systems. So I had kind of the background. I'm pretty good with numbers, pretty good with spreadsheets. So I kind of gravitated towards the finance end. And then, as I described, how I kind of managed to get into IT, it just seemed to be a natural combination of my intellectual background.
yeah, yeah, very good, very good. So in other words, what you brought into the career was that business acumen, financial acumen on top of
And engineering mindset.
and oh, you was saying on top of engineering mindset that helps you understand how systems come together and introduce like healthy dose of discipline
Right,
and
right,
think excellent. So 45-year career that
right.
now continues. You describe yourself as semi-retired. Can you share with us sort of what is the other side of that retirement? What is the other half of the semi?
Well, so I actually voluntarily retired almost 2 years ago now. Wanted to stay involved. I wanted to keep my brain busy. Uh, my vision for semi-retirement was to find some way to add some value to the next generation of IT leaders,
Yeah.
right? And surely there'd be a way to kind of lever my 45 years of experience as both a CIO and a management consultant. It took me a while to find my groove, to be honest, but I've created a way to address that next generation through a couple of programs that I've developed that focus on leadership development and mentoring for both IT professionals aspiring to be CIOs and sales and consulting professionals in the IT ecosystem that aspire to serve their CIO clients more effectively. So, two quite different cohorts there. That mission and those programs seem to be going very well. Between the two of them, I've taken over 250 people,
Wow.
next generation participants through my programs with more in the pipe. And if their feedback is any indication, my programs have been able to add some value to their career journey. So it's
Oh,
kind of
that's
fun, keeps my brain busy. Um, Working with the next generation of IT leaders is also exactly what your Summit Leadership Alliance is all about. So you and I certainly have some common interest in that
we
regard.
certainly have some common and shared interests. That actually what you described is, I feel, is my sort of my calling in life, my professional ikigai too. Is to help build world-class technology leaders in Canada for Canada, right? And
Right.
sounds exactly what you're doing. So I'm sure that there'll be some interesting conversations and perhaps computations and permutations we can have on this topic.
Indeed.
I'm particularly interested. Um, I think that what you described is sort of cohort number two. So the next gen tech leaders who recognize the need to sort of get some assistance, help, some coaching, mentorship, so they can become better, sort of more rounded executive, ready to be the CIO.
Right.
That to me is like very clear and obvious uh, cohort to serve. But this other one, oh my God,
Well,
what a
there,
brilliant idea that
there,
is.
there's an IT ecosystem out there, right? And
Yes.
consultants and vendors who sell products or services are an important part of that ecosystem. And if you look at the mid-level executive in that particular ecosystem, they need some help. How to build trust. Those organizations talk about building trusted relationships with CIO. So what does
Yeah.
that mean? What behaviors does trusted relationship actually constitute? How do you communicate? How do you pitch? What do CIOs want to hear? What they don't want to hear, right? So again, just over my career, I've probably listened to a couple hundred sales pitches, probably 1,000 sales pitches, right? I've
Probably, yeah.
probably signed a couple $100 million worth of deals over the years, right? So one has a perspective, right? And so I found a way to kind of package up that perspective, and I've done that in maybe 15 organizations now, and work with sales or consulting professionals again at the mid level to
Yeah,
try and
yeah.
hone their skills and have them improve their interactions with CIOs.
This is fantastic. So, I mean, and again, who better to do this firsthand that you would have been the ultimate client?
Well, as I explore that space, there's a lot of sort of intellectual sort of technology, if you will, around sales. They call it sales enablement, and there's as I've now discovered, there's dozens, if not thousands, of books written about how to sell and so
Yeah,
forth. Um, and I'm just basically have prepared my material just based on my own personal perspective and experiences, right? So
experience. Yeah,
so it's a different lens, but presumably it's a useful lens. Ultimately, the
this is
CIO is the ultimate customer. So
absolutely. I think that what we are all learning, and we are learning very quickly, is that. So I'll propose this. You tell me if you agree with me. What I'm experiencing, especially with this AI proliferation everywhere,
right,
you now have the ability to access knowledge of all humanity.
indeed,
You have, right. And therefore, what used to be the knowledge worker who sells their knowledge, that the cost of knowledge is quickly coming down to zero. Very soon, the actual price of getting to knowledge will be zero. It will be just a clever prompt away. So, in the world where the cost of knowledge is zero, what's left is accumulated wisdom and experience.
Right. What do you do with the knowledge? How do you
What do you do
apply
with
the
the
knowledge?
knowledge?
How do you
Correct.
lever the knowledge?
Correct. And that I think is the difference between, reading 100 books on selling and listening to, people talk on podiums and having someone like you next to the person holding hands and teaching and sharing that wisdom.
Right.
So I actually think we are entering the golden age for the golden agers. And that, you know,
Right. I agree.
I, I love that. That's very good. This is very good. Um, all right. So now let me ask you the next question. Vast career. This channel is all about tech leadership and what can we learn and extract from wisdom of the kind that you bring. I'd love to ask you if there was any pivotal moment in your career that actually shaped your general approach to leadership. And also, what would have been your most challenging projects and what did you learn from it?
Well, I suppose the Magna IT transformation story, that was a huge career changer for me. So let me
Okay.
speak to that.
Yeah.
So I think most Canadians would know the name Magna. It's widely known. It's a huge, iconic Canadian dollars, a $60 billion global player in the automotive business.
Yeah.
The company has a very interesting operating model reflecting a very decentralized and entrepreneurial culture. So that each of the 350 plants that make up Magna around the world are run largely as autonomous business units. They make their
Mm.
own decisions about many things, originally including decisions about IT. So after 60 years of pursuing that uh, approach, um, you can imagine what IT looked like when I first arrived on the scene in 2014. Just
Hmm.
extremely fragmented, dozens of different ERPs, hundreds
Yeah.
of disparate
Yeah.
applications, very few global standards. So before I arrived, the board actually had concluded that the IT situation was essentially untenable because of
Yeah.
this decentralized approach. And for three principal reasons. One, we weren't getting the economies of scale in IT procurement and operations that you would
Yeah.
expect a company of that size to get. Number two, it was very difficult to cyber secure the enterprise because there were so few standards. And number
Yeah.
three, we couldn't get the obvious business synergies that one would expect because there were so few common business processes around which to synergize. So I was recruited to come and do an IT transformation to fix all of that. And it was obvious that it was going to be a profound transformation because of the huge implicit cultural shift that was required.
Yeah.
So it was great that an IT transformation was mandated by the board, but the reality was that very few of the executives really wanted to do it because of the huge cultural implications. Why? Because fixing IT necessarily required standardization and centralization. And of course, in an extremely decentralized and entrepreneurial company, words like standardization and centralization are profanities.
Yeah.
There's just an allergic reaction to it,
Of
right?
course.
So I had a huge change management mountain to climb. Now, I think it's fair to say the IT capabilities we had to deal with first were basically commodity services,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
email, telecom, hosting, basic
Yeah.
cyber. So ironically, tech was the easy part. We had lots of work to do, but nothing that could be described as leading edge.
Yeah.
So it's really all about change management, cultural shift. To get the job done, I had to open my soft skills toolkit very wide and come up with a way to explain all of this. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What's in it for the individuals? What's
Yeah.
in it for the company? I ultimately came up with a short, single slide, sort of a vision statement that explained all of that. And I must have presented that slide 1,000 times around the world, literally.
Yeah. You had 350 business units to bring together, and every single one,
In
when they
35
first heard
countries.
about it, sorry,
Yeah, in 35 countries.
in
Right.
35 countries, and every single one, when they heard about the idea, realized, oh shit, we're gonna lose something here.
Well,
We're gonna,
I,
right?
I think I think their first reaction is how are we going to kill this guy?
So the challenge is massive. Like you
Right.
have 350 people that out of the get out of gateway, I guess the first thought is, oh my God, we're going to lose control over our
Right.
technology and
Right.
people that we know and love. Who's going to benefit here? Well, the corporation's going to benefit. The board will benefit, I guess. The bottom line will benefit. But hold on for a second, I'm going to lose stuff. Oh my
Well,
God,
so
what a
we found a way to articulate a mission statement that described how they were going to win too. So they're losing what they were losing, particularly at the plant level, were the commodity capabilities, right?
yeah,
So we kind of talked them into what's the point of you running your own email system? You get
yeah,
nothing from it. So I'll do it for you. And that will liberate you to do the much more important stuff around competitive advantage, to get operational or commercial advantages. So
yeah,
that was kind of the pitch. So
yeah,
I had the pitch described in fairly specific terms, described it 1,000 times. It took us 3 years just to do the commodity stuff. I'll be honest, it wasn't pretty. There were a lot of bumps along the
yeah,
road,
yeah,
but ultimately we got the job done to get the commodity capabilities done, which set the stage for more impactful transformations around business critical capabilities like ERP and global support systems and so forth, all of which continue to this day. So the lesson learned, I'm sure you're going to ask me about lesson learned, is the power of a simple vision communicated relentlessly, right?
oh yeah,
The lesson learned was
oh
the
yeah,
primary primacy of change management, right? I must have read about 5 books on change management at the time, and frankly, just the importance of tenacity. Because
yeah,
we hit a lot of resistance, particularly up front, for exactly the reasons you described.
yeah.
So we persevered, got it done, demonstrated business value, and frankly, at the end of 3 years, it was what took you guys so long, which is always a good sign.
This is really so. I would have expected you to say that lesson learned number one is in the importance of change management. Because
Well, that was my second one, primacy of change management, for sure.
so no, 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 but I like what you said that your first lesson, and I think actually that you are right. The first lesson, the number one lesson, is in the importance of having a clear and simple message communicated consistently and
Right,
relentlessly.
right. Because in
That
my experience, people won't change unless they understand what they're changing to and why
they
they need to change.
start with why.
There you
This is
go.
the top. Yes, start with why. I love it. This is wonderful. So for everybody listening, that's the golden nugget you take away from this. Change management, of course, is essential, but having a simple, crystal clear, compelling message. You said you had one pager that describes this all, and then communicated relentlessly and
Relentlessly.
consistently.
Right.
And I'm going to assume and add that that one pager actually describes the why.
The why and the what.
There we go. Um, that this a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. Um, how about a circumstance where you said you were in tech strategy as well? This I empathize. I've been doing that also for 20 years. Um, was there a circumstance where you've actually developed a tech strategy that you knew was correct, and then for unforeseen circumstances, you actually had to pivot? Has there
Well,
been any? Yeah.
here's a great story about unforeseen challenges. So
All right.
So stage one of the IT transformation that Magna just described was essentially building a shared service for all the commodity capabilities.
Yep.
And then that success gave us the platform to build to tackle more impactful business improvements. So we turned our sights in one case to our human resources information system. So the current state, we literally had hundreds of such systems, no standards, no process, no data. And at the time, we had 175,000 employees all over the world, right? So, you know, it's often said that people are the company's most important asset, and we didn't have any tools to manage that asset.
Yep.
So, in concert with our HR folks, we went through a 5 year process of investigating and justifying a global HRIS, a single global system to manage all those 175,000 people. We ended up selecting Workday, a wonderful product, perfectly suited to our needs. Uh, We picked Accenture as our global implementation partner. They were very well qualified. Our lead HR executive at the time was successful in getting approval for this initiative, which was something like $50 million.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think we did all the right things, getting organized, getting positioned, building the team, change management strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And we kicked off this multi-year project in January 2020. All great. Right. So
8 weeks out.
In March
Dark 6 weeks.
2020, you may
Yeah.
recall a little blip called COVID, a
Yeah.
global pandemic that literally shut the world down just as our global implementation was getting started. And of course, global travel, which was essential to our implementation approach, was stopped. And oh, by the way, everybody had to go work from home. So, talk about an unforeseen challenge. So,
Yep.
I mean, to be honest, we went through 6 weeks of agony, right? Should we
Yeah.
stop this project that we just spent 5 years planning? Or should we just figure out a way to get it done despite the pandemic? And so, I'm happy to say the story ended well. We did the latter together with our partners at Accenture. We figured out how to do a global implementation, almost all remotely. So we replanned the project. Thank God for Teams and Zoom and the
Oh
collaboration
yeah.
projects, and we just carried on. So, to be honest, it was a little rocky at first, but we proved it could be done. We, in fact, ended up saving several $1 million of travel costs because you couldn't travel,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Actually.
And
Yeah.
and believe it or not, 2 years later, we completed phase one of this project on time and on budget.
Wow.
So a victory for resilience and adaptability. But that was pretty scary at first, and that is a classic unforeseen story. Who would predict the COVID pandemic?
Yeah. Absolutely. And not only a classic story of what you also described, but boy, what a boost to a technology leader who has just saved the bacon for the whole organization, allowing it to continue the business remotely, right? That was the moment where I think IT leaders stood up and showed up. And I think if there were any doubters on the value of IT,
Right.
that moment I think proved the point.
Well, it's interesting to say that. So in the early days of COVID, I recall many companies really struggling. They didn't have the networks and the
Yeah,
VPNs and the bandwidth and all that jazz. Um, by virtue of being a global company, we had all that stuff necessarily in place already, right? So we had all the infrastructure, and so we were able to scale up pretty quickly. Even the work from home thing, without skipping a beat, really. It was
yeah.
maybe rocky for a couple of days. And I recall at the time actually got a pat on the back. So very, very rare circumstance where IT just commodity IT gets a pat on the back for, saving the bacon,
Saving
so
the
to
day.
speak. Right,
Saving the day is what
right,
happened, right?
right,
Saving the
right,
day. 'Cause, I
right,
mean, in your case, of course, you are manufacturers of
r-
goods, right?
right,
So perhaps less so, but like our industry here in Canada is sadly mostly services.
right. Well,
So
the office people had to work from home too. So we
exactly,
had the
right?
policies in place. I won't say we had contingency plans that said, "Geez, what happens if we have a global pandemic?" But we did manage to have the
Yeah,
infrastructure in place and the policies in place to carry on without skipping a beat.
yeah. Um, this was wonderful. So thanks for sharing that story. What I would love to hear next from you is, so you've been a technology executive and you've been in technology business for 4 decades plus,
Right.
and you actually joined the IT industry in what one would assume would be quote unquote a proper way. And what I mean proper way is that you are a trained engineer with an MBA in information systems, right?
And
So,
finance.
and finance.
Don't
So
forget
you
the
were like
money.
you would have been really the perfect candidate when you say 37, 40 years ago to be, the right CIO, right technology executive, and then you had a career of being that technology executive for 4 decades. So here's a question. When you reflect back to that initial way CIOs were, What was the sort of the evolution that you see up and go until now, like in the role of a tech executive?
Right.
What are those changes that you've observed? And then where do you feel or know things are heading? What would be the required attributes for successful tech executives of today and tomorrow?
Okay. Well, certainly over the years, the last 15, 20, 25 years, the CIO role has evolved considerably, right? Um, 25 years ago, you didn't really use the term CIO as the VP of technology,
Yeah.
right? It was a functional job. The role was about managing enabling technology. So keeping the lights on in terms of the infrastructure and standing up those technology-based capabilities to enable a business, stand up the ERP, stand up the payroll system, et cetera, et cetera. So meat and potatoes IT.
Support
Flash,
function, like engineering
yeah,
slash
right.
technology.
Support function, keep the lights on and stand up the technology-based initiatives, right? The
Yeah.
ERP, the data warehouse, that sort of thing. So flash forward to today, the CIO still has to worry about all those issues. But if you think about the advent of digital transformation, data and analytics, AI, the never-ending cybersecurity nightmare, just the general
Yeah.
democratization of technology in the business, right? Everybody's got an iPhone, and everybody thinks, "Well, why can't you just configure your app by, a couple sliders on your phone," kind of thing. So the role of the CIO has ballooned because the domains of technology management are so numerous and so deep now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So often in a company, in addition to the CIO role, many companies have, I guess, what I'd call adjacent C-suite roles like chief digital officer, chief information security officer, chief technology officer. Lots of chiefs. And why so many chiefs? My perspective is that a single executive can't possibly manage all that technology
Hmm.
and and do the things that a modern CIO has to do to be an effective and strategic partner to the business. And in my view, it's that last bit, being the business partner, right? Sitting at the proverbial business table, that drives the skill set of a modern CIO, which is a pretty long list. If I had to pick three skills that a modern CIO necessarily has to have, it would be number one, executive communication skills, conveying complex technology-oriented topics to many diverse stakeholder groups for their understanding and buy-in, most of whom don't have any domain knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's where skills like influencing stakeholders and political savviness and collaboration and just basic communication skills are
Storytelling.
really storytelling, really essential.
Yeah.
Number two, and I don't think this will go away regardless of AI or whatever, the ability to build teams and lead teams, attracting, retaining, deploying, motivating, leading folks in what is now a multi-generation workforce. You still got the boomers around,
Of
you've got the
course.
Gen Z people at the other end, a completely different methodology mindset, completely different values, multi-technology environment. So building the team, the people aspect in that environment becomes paramount and consumes a tremendous amount of time. And finally, similar to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, just adeptness at adaptability and organizational change management, right? Given the pace of change today, a
Yeah.
CIO has to be world class in those soft skills, right?
Resilience is the last. Is it resilience?
Adaptability,
Adaptability.
and change management, right? They kind of go hand in hand. You have to have the resilience to be able to spin on a dime, but you also have to have that mindset around organizational change management because there's so much change,
Yeah.
and the rate of technology change is getting faster and faster, right?
Yeah. I've heard many of the CIOs that I work with. Couple of statements that seem to be consistent. First, the pace of change is now at the level where the domain becomes unknowable. You cannot just you just there is no opportunity for one person to know everything that's going on. It's unknowable.
Right.
The second, the expectations of value creation are increasing while the time allowed for that is shrinking. So
Right.
there's a squeeze on both. There's a squeeze here and a stretch there. And as a result, it can feel very lonely,
Indeed.
right?
I would agree on exactly what you said, right? And I think again, the reason why there's so many chiefs now is that a single person can possibly understand all of these domains and do all the other things that are necessary to deliver value, right?
Or,
So
or yes, or the organization just wasn't able to find such a leader in the market because that is would be a very unique combination of
right,
somebody who could actually orchestrate all of those capabilities. Where I'm going with this is that it, I think that you are right. What I would perhaps add from my experience is that the emergence of CDO and CTO, in addition to the CIO and Chief Data and Chief Digital Officer, could also be the reactions of the organization that says, look, our CIO is really very technologically focused. We genuinely cannot elevate that individual into the role of a digital officer or data officer. Therefore, we need to find it elsewhere.
hmm
Right?
I,
So
I,
it's a reaction to a realization that the one that they have in place is not the right person to assume all these other portfolios. But if that person was the right person, because I know the scenarios where CDO and CTOs report into the global CIO at the top,
right.
that could be actually an effective way to solve for this, but it is very rare because this caliber is very rare. This rounded leader is very rare to
And
find.
it's very difficult to find all the required competencies in the same person,
Yeah.
right? You have to have a talent for technology, but you have to have all the soft skills. Plus, you have to understand the business. Plus, you have to have a certain level of financial acumen because we spend so much money in IT, and somebody
But
has
when
to speak to that.
and that, so to me, like, I don't know if we sort of came in the circle. That's I think is the promise for the next generation technology leaders. How do they become so well rounded to be able to actually elevate themselves into that position to be capable to orchestrate all of information and technology domains that interact in an enterprise? I think that's a promise for the next generation technology leaders, CIO. Let me not call them technology leaders. Let's call them the orchestrator of information and technology domains.
Well, it's interesting that you use that term because when I'm asked to describe sort of the CIO role in this day and age, the metaphor I use is orchestra conductor, right?
Yeah,
So an orchestra, what does an orchestra conductor do? They surround themselves with fantastic musicians and they make beautiful music together, right?
that's it.
They're not necessarily the best musicians, right?
That's right. But there is a row of string instruments,
Right,
and there is a rhythm section, right?
right,
Um, and I'll add another twist to this. Some of those musicians might actually work for the orchestra, and others are coming in for a particular
right,
presentation, right?
right.
And
The,
I think
the
that
the gig workers,
the gig exactly. So one other thing that I heard my clients talk about is that given that COVID helped us transform from being isolated and in person to being virtual and connected, IT department is actually all over the world, right? So some of them, the orchestra is all over the world. Some of them actually wear your badge and you pay them full-time salary,
right?
but there is a whole ecosystem around you that now allows you to truly orchestrate it.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. The other way to describe this would be a chef in the kitchen, right? You are a chef in the kitchen. You've got your stove, and you know understand how your stove works, and you got dishes, and then how you get your food. You get your food from growing it, buying it, renting it, right? And
Right,
each
right,
recipe requires a different combination. That's another way to describe this potential. I don't know if you agree with that.
right.
So
I kind of like the orchestra a little bit better because it really speaks to talent, orchestrating, facilitating the talent, right? And
Yes.
bringing the talent together, different talents that together make beautiful music together.
So that we just touched. Let's explore that a little bit more. So we're talking about orchestra. The leader is a conductor of the orchestra. They orchestrate the music.
Right,
Music is played by individuals who like work for the orchestra in the team, but also gig workers and other elements of the ecosystem.
right.
So we have an ecosystem to tap into. I would love to get your thoughts and your experience operating in the Canadian tech leadership ecosystem. Um, what have you observed? What have you learned? Where is the value of that ecosystem? Where are the issues and challenges of the ecosystem? When you think of the ecosystem itself, what what are the other like a layer from Canadian startups to Canadian scale ups to internationals, but also to leaders and peer groups and such? Like, how would you describe that ecosystem?
Well, I suppose there's maybe four or five elements to the ecosystem.
Hmm.
Uh, and I guess it's important to speak about what each of those players can bring to the table, particularly in terms of cementing sort of future value
Yeah.
for aspiring CIOs. So, in no particular order, you'd have government,
Yeah.
right? So, the reality in Canada today is government's got their hands full.
Yep.
Lots of issues that they have to deal with. But from a technology point of view, I think government has to be an enabler, right? Not just a regulator, right? So government should be supporting IT progress by investing in digital infrastructure,
Yeah.
maybe incentivizing skills growth,
Hmm.
collaborating with the industry and the rest of the ecosystem on technology focused policies, right? So government has a role. Most people think of the ecosystem participants in terms of service providers, right? So people who provide services to IT, the outsourcers, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think
Sure. Yeah.
going forward, certainly those service providers need to be strategic levers, right? Not just vendors. They have to somehow contribute to strategy, go beyond transactions by sharing best practices, innovation, insight, strategic guidance. So they're helping IT leaders. And you mentioned earlier my work with some of the folks in the ecosystem in terms of salespeople and consultants. That's my pitch, right? When you talk about being a trusted advisor, right? Why is it important to be a trusted advisor? Well, you're probably going to get the sale as a trusted advisor because you're not seen as just a commodity. You actually add value, and that value is about trust. And
Yeah.
trust is about providing best practices and innovation insights and so forth.
Yeah.
So service providers are part of the ecosystem. Consultants are part of the ecosystem, and they're obviously different than service providers and product people. I think consultants and need to be partners, and maybe an overused term, but the partnership is all about really helping us in the CIO seat to catalyze business IT alignment, right? If they're
Yeah.
going to be our trusted advisors, I would expect consultants and partners to provide objective insights and transformation expertise and that sort of thing to cement, to bridge the gap between business and IT. And
And
I get,
if
sorry, go ahead.
if I may add on consultants, I think one important thing I'd like to ask you, or maybe share my experience in this one. They have to operate at a peer level
Right,
in order to have the permission to respectfully challenge you as a client.
right. You have to have that executive presence to be treated as a peer, right? I would agree.
And once you are treated and seen as a peer, then I would say why you want that. I think that actually allows you to then be able to respectfully challenge, not just advise. And there is difference.
So when I talk about what it means to be a trusted advisor, that's one aspect of behaviors that a trusted advisor has, right? The sort of the objective collaborator, right? Help me figure out what my issues are and feel free and confident to challenge me, right?
Mm.
And if you can do that, then that demonstrates trust on both sides,
And that
right?
implies the necessity of having a relationship that is authentic and confidential.
And not based on a single sale,
Right. So,
right?
yeah, long term.
So it's a long-term perspective that and inherent in that
Yeah.
respect for the partner is understanding what my goals and objectives are, what my personal strengths and weaknesses are, and helps me lever all that to move my particular company forward.
Great. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. So consult. Yeah. So thank you for consultants there as a third layer of the ecosystem.
Well, you've got just the network, right? Your
Peer
peers,
group.
one's
Yeah.
peers,
Yeah.
and
Oh
your
yeah.
network.
Oh yeah.
And to me, that's all about, at the end of the day, that's all about building collective intelligence, right? So
Mm.
uh, mentoring, sharing insights, creating peer learning forums, helping junior executives grow. Uh, all of that can come out of a network. Um, in my experience, younger people don't seem to understand the power of a network. Takes years to build a network, and you never know you're going to need it until you need it, and you wished you had started 5 years ago.
And when you need
Uh,
it, it's too late to start building it.
right, exactly is exactly my point. So the whole notion of peers and networks is another part of the ecosystem that I think is very important. So there's a lot of stakeholders. That's four that I've just rattled off here: government, service providers, consultants, and just the peer network themselves.
Mm. And how, like in your experience, which of those do we have, how well is this network manifesting in Canada in your experience? Where are the gaps? Where can we do better as a country in that ecosystem?
I don't have a sense that the government is nearly as active a player than it needs to be. They're largely a regulator, and in my experience, don't do a lot of enabling. So that
Okay.
that would be a big area of weakness. And to be honest, I think the government in this day and age have bigger fish to fry. So
Hmm.
I'm not holding my breath for the government to show up. The network is alive and well. There are many CIO organizations that seem to be quite active and quite dynamic. Certainly in the major cities in Canada, there's no shortage of dinners and networking opportunities if you want to take advantage of it. Um, Vendors, service providers. I've always been a little skeptical, to be honest. They have an ulterior motive. They want to sell us
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah,
and
of
I
course.
get that, but that's just the reality of the ecosystem, and you have to play the game as well. So I think that the network, the ecosystem is alive and well in Canada. If I could wave my magic wand, the government, it'd be nice if the government could step up, but again, I think the practical realities of that happening are probably nil in the next year or two. We've got too
Yeah.
many other things to worry about.
Yeah. So implied in your message is the onus is an individual to tap into the network, to tap into the
Absolutely.
ecosystem. And
Absolutely.
and that is, I think, to me was another insight that I learned in my career. Uh, this takes time, it takes focus, it takes effort, it takes intentionality, which means you need to reserve time out of your calendar. If you don't, the time is going to disappear into other day-to-day things. So every leader, I think, the onus is on them personally to apportion a part of their schedule for the purpose of connecting, growing, extending into that ecosystem for immediate value, but also for the long-term value, that network.
So in my mentoring program, when I work with my mentees, I make 2 points. One, that the point that you've made, you need to make time to do this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if it's a couple of hours a month, right?
Yes.
You need to just block it out, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to one dinner a month or one networking dinner a month, but that's not good enough. So number two, you need to train yourself to have the personality to be able to do that sort of thing. Many IT people by nature are introverted.
Of
So
course.
So introverts can be taught to network.
Of course.
These are learned skills. And the third thing, and probably should be the first thing, you need a brand. You need a personal brand. You need to have a message, right? That is inherent in your networking opportunity. So I go through a process in my mentoring program of helping individuals develop a personal brand.
I
I have
love
them
it.
write a sentence that describes what you're all about, right?
Absolutely 100%. I
Right.
love it.
Right.
100%.
So brand is, and without a brand, you can't really network because you have no message to network
Yeah.
upon, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Without a brand, you are a outline, like the a gray figure, I guess.
Right.
A
Right. Well,
gray
you have
figure outlined in a group. Nothing,
right.
right?
You have nothing that really differentiates you. So
Yeah.
the kind of the thought process that I try and take people through is forget about forget about a personal brand. Just think about a car. Right.
Yeah.
So when I say the word Mercedes-Benz, when I say the word Chevrolet, you think they're both cars, but they have different brands. And both of
Yes.
those brands have been around for 100 years or more, and one still sees advertising for those brands, right? So,
Yeah.
it's important to invest in a brand, even a brand that's been around for 100 years.
100%. And each one of them have implicit messages of what
Exactly.
they stand for,
Right.
and both of them trigger slightly different emotion in you when you think of them, right? And it's exactly the same that applies to leadership professional brands.
Right.
An interesting, actually, I had a similar live webcast with a lady that runs a boutique specializing in executive brand development.
Right. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's actually recorded. It's on TechTonic Conversations. You should check it out.
Right.
Um, it's a great conversation. And I mentioned I heard sometimes I heard this one somebody say, we all have a brand. The brand is actually what people say about you when you leave the room,
Right.
right? So, like it or not, you probably have the brand already. This is the opportunity for you to actually grab hold of that brand and make it truly stand for what you believe, what your sort of thought leadership is, how you want to be defined. Otherwise, others will be defining a brand
Right. There's a
for you on
difference
your behalf.
there's a difference between your current brand and your aspirational brand, right? And your current brand is what you say, what people say when you walk out of the room, but that doesn't necessarily have to be your aspirational
That
brand.
and in many cases it should not be that at all. Actually, that's
Right.
that's the rumors. Actually, that's what the rumor is, as opposed to what your brand should be. But I love that you mentioned that, Paul. I am 100% with you on that. Now, you mentioned introverts. Yes, I agree. Actually, what is not maybe obvious. I actually am introvert naturally, in a sense that I don't need others to get energy. I love spending time with others, but I don't need that to energize myself. I can
Right.
energize myself by myself, right? By doing interesting things. Now,
Right.
why I mention this, many IT leaders, many technologists are introverts, as you rightly point out. We all understand the importance of working on yourself, self-development. For introverts, self-development might mean spending time to read a good book or watch a podcast or learn by myself. That is truly important and needs to continue. That is not building the network, which is another element of self-development.
Right.
So I think that what I would like to say is that building the network, being out there, connecting with people, connecting into the ecosystem, being present at those dinners is an essential component of building a well-rounded tech executive, tech leader who can orchestrate the ecosystem. And it is not and self-studying alone and learning from the book is not an adequate proxy. Both of those are important. Both of those need to be happening, right?
100% agree. So there's one thing to have a brand, is another thing to build a brand and to manifest the brand, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, one of the things that I did very early in my career was to do some public speaking, go to a conference and talk about
Yeah.
a project, right?
Yes.
So at first, many people are reluctant to do that. They don't have the self-confidence to do that. You do that 5 times over the course of a career. And number one, it's great for your confidence. And number two, it's great for networking. You do a 20-minute speech, you do a half decent job. 25 people are going to come up to you, ask questions. That was great. Can we talk about
Yeah.
this? I mean, there are ways to build your network. And for an introvert, get over it, right? If you want to build a network, you have to get over your
That's
introversions.
right.
There
Get
are
over it. Exactly.
these well, these are learned behaviors, right? And
Yeah.
I was introverted, like much like you. I was, introverted. It's I think it's a matter of self-confidence, and it's a matter of understanding the power of networking and branding and how important it is.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, in that travels, you might actually come across other introverts, making it a fantastic connection, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Wonderful. Paul, I am really grateful for your time and wisdom you've shared. We are closely coming to the end of the time we reserved. I do want to ask you a final question. Uh, what would be your advice to your younger self, given everything you've experienced in work and life?
Well, I suppose first I'd say, we've talked a lot about sort of the soft executive skills, storytelling, communication, influencing, collaborating. That's what I call the soft executive skills. So my advice is start working on developing them as early in your career as you can. Get yourself involved in career circumstances that have opportunities to get you exposure to those new skills and the ability to exercise those skills in real world situations. It's all about soft skills. I think that's the big differentiator.
Hmm.
Number two, I'll admit it, early in my career, it was important to be the smartest technologist in the room, right? Through a lot of grief and agony, one discovers that that's not really that important. It's about surrounding yourself with the smartest people in the room, and that's where we come to the orchestra conductor. The
Yep.
orchestra conductor isn't the best musician, right?
Yep.
They're the person who understands who the best musician is and recruits the best musicians from around the world to make beautiful music together. So that to me is the perfect metaphor that you have to kind of build your career around. Um, a surprising number of IT people don't have financial acumen. We spend a lot of money in IT,
Oh,
right?
yes.
So as an IT executive, you have to be able to evaluate and justify IT value by speaking the language of business, which isn't cloud this and AI that, it's dollars and cents, right? So you have
Yes.
to have some sense of financial acumen. Start your network, just, apropos our last 5 minutes of conversation, start your network as soon as you can. It takes years to build a good network, and the day you need it is going to be 5 years late. Right.
Yeah.
You never know when you need a favor. You never know when
Yes.
you need a job, frankly. Right. So get out and network. And finally, find a role that matches your passions from which you can derive joy. I mean, in my experience, I had a lot of fun at work, right? And having fun at work makes a huge difference. You got to find a role where, work isn't a chore, it's fun.
Fantastic. Paul, this was a masterclass. Thank
Well,
you so much.
my
Uh,
pleasure.
we, we've covered a lot of topics. This was wonderful for the audience members. Of course, we will soon post this on YouTube. I want to thank you all very much for your time, and I would like to wish you all a fantastic Wednesday afternoon. Paul, I very much look forward to chatting with you soon. All the best.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.